So good evening, everyone. You're welcome to this evening's webinar titled Breeding for Financial Success. And my name is Thomas Ryan here in Tirlawn. And indeed, thank you very much for taking the time during what is this really extremely busy period on your farm to join this webinar titled Breeding for Financial Success. So amid the busy calving season now, we also know that you are and will be in the coming weeks making 2026 breeding decisions, which will impact on future productivity and profitability at home on the farm in areas including milk solids, EBI, TB, performance, and much more. Therefore, here in Tirlawn, we're delighted to host this supportive information webinar with speakers from the Tirlawn Teagasc Future Farm Programme, from Davey Genetics and ICBF. And so specifically, we'd like to thank Sandra Hayes, who is the Teagasc Tirlawn Future Farm Programme Coordinator, for joining us. Also, one of our Future Farm Programme participants, Jack Carney. Jack farms with his parents, Larry and Annette, in Rathcormac in East Cork, and he also joins us on the webinar. And then thirdly, Kevin Downing, the Service Development Manager with ICBF. And indeed, finally, we're really pleased that Ger Ryan, the General Manager at Davey Genetics, is also joining us. This is a webinar where your views, your opinions and your questions are really important. And therefore then we'd ask you during the course of the webinar to text in your questions, and you can text them in there to 086 180 3947. So that's 086 180 3947. Or alternatively, you can send us an email. And the emails will reach us at questions@tirlawnfarmlife.com. So let's jump into the webinar with Sandra. Sandra Hayes from Teagasc is going to start the webinar by giving us an overview of the breeding performance of the Future Farm Programme. So Sandra, thank you for joining us, and we'll share your slides now.
Thanks, Thomas, and good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us this evening. So as Thomas said, we're looking at breeding for financial success. So where we started was we had an overview look at the breeding performance and the strategy of the Future Farm participants that have been in the programme. So we took the data which we've assembled from ICBF, from PastureBase, from the National Farm Survey, and from our Profit Monitor programme that we complete with all the participants, to give you kind of an overview of how they have done over the last number of years. So as you can see in the first slide there, the average cow numbers, they've gone from 199 to a max of 226 and dropped there slightly to 222 there in 2024. And I suppose the slight drop there would be matching the change with the nitrates effects over the last 2 years. If we move to the next slide, we will see an overview of the milk solids per cow. So 2020, we have 498 for an average of the group, 497, 510 and 484 dropped there in 2023, and a regain back up last year on 2024 to 494. And I suppose a figure to mention in here, just from comparisons, and I suppose the title of the webinar is Breeding for Financial Success. If you take the average of the Tirlawn supplier in 2024 at 411 average, that's a difference for the group in 2024 of 83 kgs of milk solids. And if we take the average price that the monitor farmers received for a kg of milk solids and multiply that then by the average number of cows we just saw, 222, that's delivering an extra income of over 117,000 to each participant on getting that production, that extra production out of the cows. So it's well worth putting the effort, as we'll show later on in this webinar, into that, doing the work into the breeding to get that return. So next slide there, Thomas. So we did something similar here as well. We wanted to see the efficiencies that have been gained by the monitor farmers over the last number of years. So what we did was a calculation to see what was the effects of fats and protein if we held the base price at 40 cent over the last number of years. So what that has shown to us, what we did is we looked at the first year, 2020, so literally 5.99 cents. You could say 6 cents through, the extra benefits of the fat and protein above that price. And just as a calculation, I took what we had in the base year of 2020. I took it away from what has been achieved in 2024, and that gain is worth just under 9,500 per farm compared to the base year. So it's just showing you through picking, you know, a good team of bulls and through grassland management and good genetics that the gains are there on the farm to achieve, you know, over the last 5 years of the programme. Next one. So another key parameter that we look at in the joint programme as well is the 6-week calving rate. So another success story here. In the base year of 2020, the average 6-week calving rate was 76%. And as you can see, it has steadily grown over the 5 years of the programme up to 84%. Now, what we target, the industry target here, we would be looking at 90%. And every 1% that we have here is worth €8. So the Tirlawn average in 24 is 72%. So if we take the difference for what the Monaghan farmers, and that it is 12 multiplied by your €8, you've got the difference of €96 per cow on your 6-week calving rate. I'm always giving out that, you know, that sort of figure, you know, they don't see it, but where the group is seeing it is in efficiency gains as well, getting all those calved compactly, and those cows calved in that 6-week period return the maximum amount in what we would plan for a 300-day milking programme. Another good story here is the average EBI. So the target we would have here for the programme is that every year you would gain €10 in your EBI, and we've gone from 142 up to 232, and some of the success stories there have been that one particular herd went from €90 up to 191, which is more than €10 a year. So through research done by Teagasc, it has been shown that for every €1 increase in EBI, it has resulted in €2 profit. So the difference there between the Tirlawn average of 181 and 232 is a plus of €132 profit per cow over and above the Tirlawn average. So we'll move on now and give an overview of the breeding performance. If we kind of select out of all that information we're after presenting to the story that's on the Carney family farm, Jack, Larry and Annette. So the cow numbers when they started off in the programme were at 142. Slight increase then, good 18 cows up to 160, and that held for the next number of years. So I suppose when I joined the programme then in 2022, we concentrated our efforts on maximising what could be grown from the milking platform to feed those 160 odd cows as efficiently as possible. And there has been a change up to 230 in 2025 as extra land has been secured and extra heifers have been bought. So as I say, the good journey still continues. EBI, another success story here. In 2020, the Carney started off, their average EBI was 179, and every year since they have added on, so it's gone from 179 up to 240. So we worked that out, that's nearly that's €61 over 6 years. So that's €10 a year. Like I said, the target would be €10, and that has been achieved. And I can talk to Jack in a few minutes about how that was secured for the farm. The 6-week calving rate, so it was at 84, 83, jumped up to 92, slight dip in 23, and then back up. As I say, the industry target that we would, you know, aim for would be 90%, but the Carneys achieved 96% in 2024. So if anyone has any questions on that, they can. And then the milk solids per cow, we are at 498 in 2020, then moved up to 502, 536 in 2022, dropped slightly, and then 518, but still, you know, exceptional performance from the herd. As I say, if you think the 160 cows when they were in those years, 502, 536 and 504, they're exceptional figures, so they are. What I have here is just a snapshot of the calving and fertility data based on the 2024 calving report. So the herd on average is calving, each cow is calving down on average every 364 days. As I said, the 6-week calve rate is 96%. I suppose an important thing for the carnies is that, you know, they record all the data, so all the calving surveys are filled in. All AI bred replacements are 100% AI. And I suppose a key parameter we would see in performance here would be that heifers are calved down between 22 and 26 months, 100% here. The EBI, as we said, is 232, and the EBI weighting of 20 to 25 inseminations was 340, so all 5 stars. And the last slide I think that I have then, or the second last slide, is just a snapshot of the EBI. So some of the things that we would be looking at in choosing cows going forward, or that carnies look at, would be the PTAs for the fat and the protein percentage, also the kgs of fat and protein as well. You can see them there, they're just not ringed. You know, the fertility of the herd, the maintenance, the health, positive for health, and as you see 240 is there. And if we look to the last slide, you'll see what that has done to the herd. These are the figures for the 2024 and the 2023 calves. So as you can see what I've ringed there, the predicted for fat and protein are ahead of what the base of what's in the herd at the moment, and that's what we'd be looking for. So the EBI there is 286 and 247. So Jack, plenty of figures there on your breeding success on the farm that you've worked on hard for the number of years. I suppose the first question I'd ask that for our audience, to achieve that, when do you start thinking about breeding, or, you know, when do you sit down and do that work in picking the bulls?
Yeah, I suppose first job we do is go in and get a list of catalogues, and once we have them, it's a kind of a simple enough process. We decide what criteria we want to try and hit for the year, and then go in and try and find the best bulls. But we do try and hit certain criteria, and then try and find it. And look, not always can you find a bull that suits what type of criteria you want, but like, yeah, it usually starts around kind of early February, kind of, and we usually have a kind of a call made by the 1st of March. So.
Okay. And that criteria, as I say, there's a bit of time spent having a look. What do you want for the herd? And we'll go into that in a minute. But how important is it as well to do a bit of work on picking the right cows as well? And it's not just the bulls. Like 50% of the next generation comes from the bulls, 50% comes from the cows. You know, do you put sex semen into any cow that you have, or, you know, what goes for beef? How do you work on selecting the cows?
Yeah, sure. Like, I suppose, look, we're milk recording, and all our cows are genomically tested. So like, we kind of have a fair idea and a good snapshot of every cow in the place. And look, the last few years now, it has been a case of, look, our probably cows with our best kind of percentage solids have been the ones we've been breeding off of. Okay. So that's just personally, that's something that we've been trying to push on now for the last 2 or 3 years. And because I suppose, look, fertility hasn't been a huge issue now over the last few years and stuff. So we can start focusing and kind of find, I suppose, accelerating a certain aspect of type of breeding we want, you know. So like, we just, like, for the last few years, highest percentage fat and protein, early calving, kind of calved without any issues and all that, and just a general shape of a cow we'd like then on top of that as well. So like, if we've been like a big lanky cow that we don't want or something like that, she's not going to get us extra. So like, okay. It's a simple process as well. Like, you know, once you kind of go down through ICBF, pick out the cows you want. Sure, it's only a case of have a look through them after that, and it's straightforward.
Okay, so we've talked about picking the bulls, picking the cows. What tool do you use then when you've done that to, you know, some people say, do you select each bull for each cow? No, you don't do that. So what tools do you use to make it easier?
Sure, I suppose, look, once you've your cows picked and your bulls picked, such as only a case of fire it all into sire advice and leave it at that. Again, like, it's only a case of making it as simple and as quick as possible, you know. So this time of year, like, you've enough other stuff going on, but it's such an important job, you kind of need to get it right too, like, you know. But sure, look, sire advice hasn't really put us too far wrong with the last. Sure, look, we're using it for as long as I'm at home now, so yeah, we just use it every year and sends it all to the AI man, and every cow gets the bull that's chose for it then. So it's a good tool, to be fair, and it's very simple, like, you know.
Yeah, you know, yeah, and for somebody, let's say on this call, that hasn't used that before, like there is help out there to, you know, for people to get to use it, but you wouldn't do a breeding season without it, I'd say, Jack.
Well, no, no, you wouldn't. Like, to be fair, like it does, like, it really does select the right bull for the right cow, you know. And I suppose, look, I don't know how it works, but there's other people on the call that will know how it works. But it hasn't put us far wrong. You can see there, like, the herd is progressing nicely. They are fertile, they're milking well, and their EBI is growing and growing. So, like, and it's growing in the sense, like, it's growing in the way we want it to grow, you know. So, like, you know, we want to focus on fertility, we want the health to improve, we want, you know, we want to kind of, I suppose, increase our maintenance figure a little bit. We want to
maybe you might expand on that a bit. What do you mean by the maintenance? What is the maintenance due? Because some people don't understand that.
Well, the maintenance figure is the size of the cow, like, you know, and it kind of does directly correlate with the average weight of the herd. It does in our case anyway. So, like, we look, you can see on the cow numbers there, our herd is growing and they're going to have to walk further. So we want a cow, probably a more efficient cow, to be able to do the walking and still go on calf and shove out 500 kgs mixed solids, and, you know, not cause a whole pile of issues along the way, you know. So it's a more, I suppose, a more efficient cow is probably what we're looking for, you know. And I just see the maintenance figure, one of those ones that is probably, look, has to be a bit higher for what we want our cows to do, like, you know. So, like, we're probably aiming for a maintenance figure when we're picking our bulls between 10 and 20, you know. And, like, you know, it's just kind of a, I suppose, look, of a sub 600 kilo cow. We don't want big cows, you know. And it's look, personal preference, you know. It's the way, it's the route we're going. So that's what, look, that's why we choose that.
Okay. And when you talk about criteria as well, what would you be looking for? As I mentioned on the slides there, the kgs of fat and protein. So you know from your reports what you have, and, you know, how much do you increase them up by when you're looking for your team of bulls?
Not being smart, no. I try and find the highest kgs, percentage fat and protein I can find in any given bull. That's so, like, say, oh, I have, like, here is my limit, like, maybe up here is the limit of all the bulls. If you can get a team of bulls up higher, the higher you can get them. I suppose the better, basically, the more you might get paid for your milking time, you know. And that is literally, that's
the end goal
at the end of the day. Yeah, you know.
And you mentioned there the team. So, you know, we would always, between, you know, from Teagasc, we'd always emphasize the importance of a team. So when you're picking, you have a team of bulls as well, and just for yourself, why is that important?
Look, you're spreading the risk, I suppose. If there just does happen to be one dud inside in it, you sure, look, it's only one dud and it's not going to affect a huge amount of cows, you know. Whereas, look, that's the reason we do it anyway. We just want to spread the risk a small bit, and you know, it just, look, even be it a dud with infertility, or, look, maybe they're not breeding the nicest stock in the world, at least you have maybe a selection of heifers off 10 different bulls, you know, and then that's only 4 heifers that you might not like, you know. So it's not a big deal at the end of the day if 1 or 2 straws aren't doing what they should be doing, like, you know. But generally speaking, look, we don't have any bothers, but look, you can't take the risk.
Okay, very good. And I suppose something that we were talking about the other day, I thought it was with all the work that you do behind the scenes and picking, you know, the right bulls and putting them on the right cows in your herd, you judge your breeding season by the 6-week calving rate and your empty rate. You might, like, if they're your 2 mantras, I suppose you said.
Yeah, sure. I suppose, look, to me, the 6-week calving rate, you get all your cows calved early. They get a couple of chances to cycle, and it's giving you a huge step up into the next breeding season. And it goes round the whole circle, you know. And, like, usually if your 6-week calving rate is good, look, your empty rate isn't too bad either, you know, because cows have gotten that chance to cycle, and you haven't a huge amount of late calving cows that you're trying to breed off and trying to bring forward even a month or whatever, like, you know. So yeah, look, again, it's only a case of keep it simple. They're the two criteria I try to hit every year when it comes to breeding, and if I can keep the empty rate low and the 6-week calving rate high, sure, it is a bit of a success, really, you know.
Yeah. And as we've shown there, Jack, just a final question to wrap up. You have achieved, you know, the breeding has gone in the right direction. Your EBI has risen significantly over the last number of years in the programme. No doubt you would have done that without the programme as well. You know, you're very driven, the family's very driven to get the production, the best production they can from the herd. If there was somebody out there that, you know, hadn't taken that journey just yet, where would you say for them to start, you know, to get them going in the right direction with their breeding? Is there one or two simple things you'd say to them to do this year?
I suppose if you're only getting going, talk to people that have done it. I suppose discussion groups, you can't beat them for learning and figuring things out, you know. Like I'm lucky I yourself to go through things with, like, you know, all this, so we can kind of go through it. But look, there's plenty of advisors out there that are only willing to help, and I would say discussion groups. There's good farmers in every discussion group in the country, and there's no reason to say that they won't help you along the way as well, you know. And you can kind of see, look, what type of cows they have, what they're doing, and you kind of, you know, get an idea. So that's where I'd start anyway, you know.
Good.
After that, then look, get the catalogues, pick the bull, set yourself out a set of criteria that you want from your team of bulls. It's very simple then. Go ahead and pick out all the bulls that have most of the criteria, that meet most of your criteria. When you have your list of bulls, then you'll see some things that you don't like and knock out the ones you don't want and just put them into sire advice and call it. That's it. Simple as that.
Brilliant advice, and thank you very much for sharing your story, Jack. Much appreciated.
Oh well, cheers.
So Sandra and Jack, look, that's really, really wonderful. I mean, what I'm taking out of that is the importance. How many times was sire advice mentioned as a really important bull selection tool? The role of milk solids in terms of when you are selecting bulls and having a team of having that team of bulls, and the whole focus on profitability through genetics and EBI. We are getting a number of questions coming in, and they're coming in a number of ways. First of all, they're being texted in at 086 180 3947, and also coming in via email, questions@tirlawnfarmlife.com. So please, over the next presentation, maybe consider continuing to send them in. We're joined next by Kevin Downing from ICBF, and given the emphasis, I think, in the discussion so far around the role of genetics EBI in terms of driving on profitability, I think, Kevin, your presentation is going to be really useful and really important to us in terms of putting all that in context. And indeed, another challenge here and now is TB, and it'd be interesting to see if you have something around guidance around selecting for TB resistance as well. So Kevin, over to you, and thank you for joining the webinar.
Thanks very much, Tomas. Just before I start, just want to compliment Jack and the family and the performance of the herd there. That's the co-op performance report, which you saw there with all the stars. You'd go a long ways before you'd see as good a report. So just compliments, and a lot of the messaging that I'm going to be giving here, I think Jack has been implementing heretofore. So these are the topics that I'm just going to cover over the next 10 minutes or so. So the EBI trend over the last 20 years, the EBI and how it's working, the genomic bulls over daughter proven bulls, AI bulls over stock bulls, and the dairy beef index, and how we should use that. And also then I will cover a little bit on TB at the end. So just looking at the trend in EBI, so what I have here in the graph is the blue line, which is the one on top there. That's the trend in EBI over the last 25 years. And you'll see that, you know, in the initial years when EBI was introduced, there was a gradual, slow but gradual increase in the rate of gain. And at the same time, milk continued to increase, and that's the brown line at the bottom, but the fertility was decreasing, and that decrease didn't really go into the positive until, you know, after the introduction of the Gene Ireland program and genotyping, which really gave it a good kickstart. And you'll see now that both the pink line and the brown line, which is the milk and fertility sub-index within the EBI, and there's 8 different sub-indexes, but you'll see the 2 of them are increasing at a similar rate. And as already been mentioned, for €1 increase in EBI, there's a €2 increase in extra farm profitability. And you'll see that, well, what does that mean over the last 20 years or so? So it's a €184 gain is what we've achieved, and that equates to about €11 per year profit, and that's the same as €20 into your hand. So again, for €1 increase, €2 in profit, so over €20 per year. Now looking at the actual performance on the ground, so I've actually just pulled together, these are hot off the press, the 2024 statistics, which you, the farmer, all your data is in this mix. So what we do is we get all the co-op performance data and all the fertility data, and we compile it, and we've divided it in here into the bottom 20% of herds on EBI, the average herd on EBI, and the top 20% on EBI. And you'll see the number of herds that are making up that, about 2,600 in the bottom and about 2,600 in the top, with the average coming in there at €177 for the 14,000 herds that we're analysing in this exercise. And a lot of data there. So, but if we just focus on the difference between the average herd, okay, and the top 20%, we clearly see that all the metrics down there, so from milk litres per cow, you'll see there's a difference of over 400 litres per cow for the high EBI herds compared to the average. You'll see the percentages there, plus 0.21 and plus 0.13. But the big one there, 51 kilos extra milk solids per cow for the herds in the top 20% compared to the average herd. And all that's achieved with better SEC, better milk price. But the important thing as well is look at the 6-week calving rate and the calving interval. And really, 6-week calving rate is one of the key drivers for profitability. And you can see the figures Jack is achieving there, you know, really top class figures. And you can see here again, the top EBI herds, not quite as good as Jack, but they're hitting 81% calved in 6 weeks compared to the national average at 69. So that's 12 days of a difference in 6 weeks, or 12% difference in 6-week calving rate, and also 2 weeks extra improvement in calving interval. And the other benefit is that all that's achieved with a lower carbon footprint per cow. So this is all the data we get from Bord Bia and from the audits that are done. And you'll see there again, you know, minus 0.09, so a better carbon footprint for the higher EBI herds. Just looking at the economics of that, and if we multiply out the extra gain in kilos of milk solids, that 51 kilos extra, if you multiply that by 650 per kilo of milk solids, that's €331 more per cow. And then multiplying that by the average herd size, which you'll see there is 99 cows for the average herd, that's over €33,000 more. So the top herds are that much ahead, and that's just on milk solids alone. So again, really strong message here. If you want to drive profitability, you need to drive your EBI. And while we're making €11 per year gain on average in the last couple of years, can we go faster? And things like the National Genotyping Programme are going to help drive that rate of gain as well. Moving on then to the question of whether we use daughter-proven or genomically selected sires. And again, year in, year out, you'll see that the herds that are using the genomic sires, the progeny from these sires, have a higher EBI. And what we have here in the graph, the top line is the blue line, they're the G1 bulls. So they're the bulls that are in year one of production. So they're your Gene Ireland bulls in effect. Your GS are bulls in year 2, 3, and 4, and your daughter proven are year 5 plus. And what we have clearly shown here in this is the average EBI of the first calf females. So if you look at 2015, that's the EBI today of the animals that calved down in 2015. Again, you clearly see as you go along consistently, the GS and the G1s, they're about €30 higher than the daughter proven. Okay, figures will fluctuate and bulls will fall, and Jack highlighted there the use of teams of bulls, an important tool as well to try and negate some of the fluctuation that you will see in indexes. But overall, looking at it, clearly, it's clear that using GS bulls, you're going to have €60 more profit than a daughter proven. Moving on to the next slide, so the EBI of progeny of stock bull versus AI, and I presume a lot of you are using AI in this group, but there's still about 30% of replacements bred to stock bulls. So again, looking at the graph, and this is the EBI of the stock bull versus the AI bulls, and again, there's about €60 to €70 of a difference between the EBI of the stock bull. So again, why would you use a stock bull when you're losing that much? That and multiply that by 2, it's over €120 per daughter. So again, it's a no-brainer. You need to start using AI. And looking at the actual performance then, so here we have the average performance of the AI progeny versus the stock bull progeny. So there's over 600,000 cows out of AI and 123,000 out of stock bulls. And you'll see more milk solids, or more kilos of milk, more milk solids, better days in milk, and a better calving interval. Multiplying the difference there again in milk solids equates to about 163 per cow. And again, in your average 100 cow herd, again, €16,000 of a difference, by switching from using stock bulls to AI. So again, the question is, why would you continue to breed replacements for stock bull when you're losing that kind of revenue? Next slide. So again, just looking at the trend in the actual dairy herd, you'll see there the top line there is the overall total number of cows, and that was increasing steadily up to about 2022, 23, and in the last year or two, that has flatlined or even just decreased slightly in 2024. So the number of cows has stabilized. But if you look at the bottom lines, you'll see there the blue line, the top blue line, that's the number of calves born out of dairy sires. And the bottom line is the number of calves born from a beef sire out of the dairy herd. And you'll see there that in 2023, there was actually more beef coming from the dairy herd than there was dairy. And again, that trend has continued in 2024, and we would expect that to continue over the next 5 years. We don't see any change in those trends. So you'll see a continued reduction in dairy bred animals and an increase in the beef animals. And that's down to the use of sex semen. And I know Jar's going to discuss sex semen in a later presentation. But I'm going to look at the dairy beef index, and this is the beef side of the house. So what animals do you or what bulls do you use when you're breeding a beef on the dairy herd? And the whole idea of the index is to try and produce a calf that's going to be more saleable and more profitable at finish, with minimal impact on the calving difficulty and the gestation of the offspring. So if you look at the makeup of it, just to go back a slide, just the actual makeup, it's primarily there's a big emphasis on the beef index of the overall DBI, and that's the carcass traits, primarily the carcass weight, carcass conformation, but also the age at finishing, how quickly those animals finish. So again, when you're picking bulls, yes, focus in on the overall beef subindex, but we do need to look at the actual makeup of the calving and the beef. Very similar to the EBI, where we look at milk and fertility. Again, within this index, we have to look at the beef subindex as well. So the next slide will show a good example of two bulls, okay, the exact same dairy beef index of 190, bull A 190, bull B 190. But you'll see the makeup of the calving and the beef subindex is very different. One is very strong on calving and not so strong on beef, and the other one is the other way around. And if you look at, well, what's driving that, and you'll see there, it's coming from, I suppose, a little bit coming from the calving. So the bull B has a 3% compared to 2.5% for bull A. And again, the gestation, better gestation figure for the bull A. But big one there is the carcass weight. So you'll see there 10 euro or 10 kilos of a difference in carcass weight between bull A and bull B. So again, if you're picking a bull for heifers, for example, you might be looking at bull A, but certainly for cows, we can afford to use a higher calving difficulty on our cows, and certainly the later or the more mature cows, we can certainly increase the calving difficulty a bit so that we can accommodate the extra carcass. But moving on to the next slide, I'll just show an example. We don't actually even have to increase the calving difficulty within the index itself. If you look at, for example, what I'm showing here is all the bulls on the current active bull list, broken down by the calving difficulty PTA, from 1 down to 8% calving difficulty. And you'll see the number of bulls that fall into each of those categories and what the DBI of it is. But moving to the next image, it just shows there the variation between the minimum beef merit and the maximum beef merit within those ranges. And if we focus in, just move on. If you focus in on the 3%, you'll see there that the difference between the minimum subindex for beef and the maximum, one is at 39 and the other is at 175. So there's 136 euro of a difference. And that's with the same level of calving difficulty. So again, just highlights the importance when we're picking these bulls, not just to pick 3% calving difficulty with a high DBI. We do need to look at the beef subindex within it as well. Okay, so moving on to the next section, which is the piece on TB. And look, you're all well aware, and it's been highlighted in the media, the way the increase is going in TB reactors. Another 44% increase in 2024. And you'll see the figure there of over 41,000 TB reactors in 2024. And unfortunately, that trend has been continuing since 2016. We're seeing an upward spiral, but certainly in the last year or two, it seems to have been, getting out of control. So, well, what can we do from a breeding side of the house to try and help reverse this trend? So moving on, so we have an index within the health subindex of the EBI called TB resistance, and it generally runs from the top there. The top is at 14 and the bottom is at 1.5. So that's the range from the best to the worst, and the average there is coming in at around 8.5. And what does 8.5% mean? That essentially means that if a herd is exposed to TB, okay, 8.5% of that bull as progeny will become reactors. Okay, that's if a herd is exposed, and each bull, and you'll see it on the active bull list, has an individual figure. So the lower figure, the better. Okay, so if you're picking bulls, focus in on the lower TB resistant percentage there. So if we look at the real life example, and the example that the real life example of the number of reactors in 2024, 41,630, they have an average genetic merit of 8.5%. Okay, so if we were to switch and we were to be breeding bulls that are up at 12.5%, well, essentially the country then would have over 61,000 reactors if that's the trend in our genetics. But what we want to try and do is reduce that down, and if we start picking bulls that are really good on TB, we can reduce it down. So if we got down from 8.5 to 4.5, now that's going to take a good couple of years to achieve, okay, because breeding isn't going to happen overnight, but maybe if we really focus hard on it, we can achieve that by maybe 2030. Look at the reduction that we have in reactors. It's halved. gone from 41,000 down to 22,000. So it's not going to get rid of TB breeding alone, but it's certainly going to make a big impression in trying to reduce the exposure if you do have a TB outbreak. So instead of having 10 cows going down, you might only have 2 cows becoming reactors. So how do you interpret the health subindex and the traits? So we've introduced this only in the last couple of days, actually, this traffic light system. So for each one of you there, if you go on to the animal search, you'll see that down in the health subindex traits, down at the bottom of the page, we've it broken into red being the worst third on the index, yellow being the middle third, and green being the best third. And there's 3 bulls that I just pulled out. Okay, 3 bulls from the active bull list, and you'll see the top bull there. He's poor on TB, so you'll see the arrow is in red. He's in the bottom third. The next bull down, and if you click on, it'll just highlight him. Just click on. You'll see the next bull, the middle bull. He's in the middle, so he's average for TB. So again, no problem using the likes of this bull. It's the ones in red we need to just be cautious of, and ideally, if we can at all, we need to be focusing on using the ones in green. And you'll see his exposure there, or his percentage, is 3.7. The middle fella there was at 7.8, and the top fella is at 11%. So again, that's how you will interpret the index and know where you are in TB. Moving on to the next slide, we've also included on the active bull list up on the website. So again, farmers were saying to us, oh, I can't see it anywhere. I don't know where to find it. And it's difficult going through all the catalogues from all the various companies. So the ICBF active bull list has all the bulls listed, and you'll see there, click on, it'll just show you, it's highlighted here. This is where you see the PTA of the TB. And again, green being the best third, red being the poorest third. Moving on, we've also incorporated into your own EBI profile. So when you go onto the ICBF website, with your username and password, go into the EBI profile. Over on the right hand side, click on, you'll see again we've highlighted the TB of your own herd. Wouldn't get too hung up on it, but farmers may like to know where each individual animal is at. But really what you want to know is where your herd is at. And if you click, you'll see there we've introduced a new, click on, you'll see we've introduced the health subindex there. If you click on that blue, down will pop the PTAs of your own herd, the national average, and where the top 10% are at. And you'll see this herd is just slightly poorer than the national herd on TB. It's coming in at 7.87% compared to 7.78, which is where the national cow population is at. So again, a good indicator of, you know, where you sit and what bulls you need to pick to try and improve that metric. So finally, my last slide, just want to quickly give you some take-home messages and some of the breeding guidelines that Jack has implemented on his own farm. Again, breed from the best. Pick your best EBI cows to breed from. Okay, cows that have and within that, cows that have no problems, you know, no somatic cell count issues, no lameness issues, that are high in EBI. So breed from the best, and it's DBI for the rest. Okay, the dairy beef index for the rest. So these are bulls, are cows that are poor on EBI. Okay, below 185, that's the cutoff we're saying, because 180 is around where the national average cow is. So we're saying only breed from the best half of your herd. So breed from the start of the breeding season, use the DBI. So don't be waiting until the end to start using beef. Try and use it at the start. Don't be breeding your low EBI cows to dairy. Put a beef straw into those. And use a team of bulls. Use a team of high EBI bulls. And again, a team is, when we say a team, it's when you're picking a team of bulls, typically for the 100 cow herd, you're talking about 8 bulls. And again, you don't use 2 bulls at 50% and the other 6 divided into 50. What you try and do is spread the bulls equally across the herd. So no more than 15% of any one bull should you use, especially if you're using the young GS bulls. Similarly with some of the daughter proven bulls, because really they're only proven for milk. They really, if they're on the active bull list, they really haven't been proven for fertility yet, and their proofs are liable to fluctuate as well. Sex semen, and I know Ger will cover it, but again, you know, use sex semen to generate most of your dairy calves, dairy replacements, if at all possible. It's the best way to achieve, you're able to pick your best cows and use sex semen on that. I suppose for herds, one caveat is for herds that have poor fertility from conventional AI, well then I wouldn't be recommending using sex semen. You do need to have good conception rates yourself with conventional AI. Sex semen isn't going to improve it, it will disimprove it, but not more than 10% is what we're kind of seeing. And again, use it in the first 6 weeks. And the rule of thumb is if you want for a dairy female in the parlour, you need to be using about 2 sex straws for each dairy female that you require. Using the Sire Advice, it's a really useful tool. And I know, Jack, you probably spend time looking at the bulls and catalogues. I would recommend everyone to actually use the Sire Advice. There's sliders in there that you can use. It'll show you where you're at yourself, and you can use the sliders to move the dial up or down for all the various metrics, whether it's the sub-indexes or whether it's the PTAs. So it's a very useful tool to actually help reduce down the bulls that will match the criteria that you wish to use in your herd. And every herd will have slightly different criteria. Jack is very much focused, as he said, on the percentages. Other herds will be focusing on kilos. More herds will be putting a lot of emphasis on the health sub-index. So again, the sliders that are there on the Sire Advice tool will help you achieve that and reduce it down to the bulls that you want to use. And finally, if you are choosing high EBI bulls, try and choose the ones with the lowest TB value as well. There's lots and lots of bulls to choose from. That they'll match the criteria, but within that, make sure that you're using bulls that ideally are less than 8.5%, which is where the average is for the bulls. But again, if we can get down to 6.5%, you're going to get, we're going to make faster gains. So again, we've made a lot of progress over the last number of years, and the beauty of genetics is it's cumulative and permanent. Once it's in the herd, it stays in the herd. It's not like protected urea or any of the other things we're using to try and improve our sustainability. Once you stop using those, you lose the gains. Whereas again, once you use a good bull, the genetics remain in the herd. So again, while we're making good progress, we know we can do better and go faster. And I think I've shown some of the tools there that we can use to try and fast track and improve those rates of gain. So that's it, Chairman. Thanks very much.
Kevin, thank you very much for a really detailed and comprehensive presentation. And I know I've taken a lot, and so too have many of those who are watching, because they are sending in their questions to us at 086 180 3947 and emailing in at questions@tirlawnfarmlife.com. Look, I've taken a lot from that. I think that the first piece there on top, breed from the best, and DBI for the rest, is something for us all really to think about. You and the other two speakers so far have spoken about the role of sex semen, and I note here you're talking about using sex semen to generate most or all of your dairy replacement calves. So now maybe it's probably appropriate that we would talk with Ger Ryan from Devey Genetics around sex semen, and maybe look its role and what Devey is doing in this area. So maybe Ger, will you talk to us for a few minutes, please, around sex semen? And thank you, and you're very welcome to the webinar.
Thank you very much, Tomas, and thank you for the invitation. I'm going to speak from a Devey point of view around some aspects of sex semen for Tier Lawn suppliers. Moving on to the first slide. I suppose the history of sex semen in Ireland, if we go back probably 4 to 5 years, the technology was relatively new to the Irish market. As a company, we sent a small number of bulls abroad to get sexed. Our customers were saying to us that the demand was growing. We had a limited selection because the bulls were being sent abroad. And what happened after that with them was COVID, and the logistics getting semen back to Ireland during COVID for the breeding season made it very, very difficult. So with that in mind, probably 4 years ago, if we move on to the next slide, 4 years ago, we signed a contract with a company called Sexing Technologies to have an Irish-based sex semen lab. So that gave the company and other companies in Ireland a larger selection of bulls to be available as sex for our customers. It was temporarily located there until the autumn of 2024. The board of Devey was made a decision about 12 months ago to start construction of a custom-built sex semen lab. And if we see a picture of it in the next slide, Tomas, and what that will allow the company do is cater for future growth and future demand, which we see for the next 5 to 10 years in the growth of sex semen. So we have a lab at the back of our own headquarters here that will facilitate future growth for the Irish market into the future, which is a big investment made by the company. If we look at, I suppose, the models for producing replacements, and I've picked a figure just a little over 25% replacements on a 100 cow herd. If you look at a conventional semen model on my left, you can see the ratio of calves by using all conventional semen that you'll get in a dairy herd. If you look on my right, which is all sex semen model, you will see a total contrast in the proportion of calves born on that farm. Sex semen is 90% purity. So even by going in all sex semen model, you'll get 3% dairy calves. Okay, but the big thing is, from a farmer's point of view, the 70% dairy beef calves now being born into a 100 cow herd using an all sex semen model. The cost of sex semen model is slightly higher than the conventional semen model in terms of the purchase price of semen, but the revenue, if you sell all the calves, we estimate is going to more than compensate for that extra cost of sex semen. And that doesn't even take into account, I suppose, the genetic gain that you can make by going in all sex semen model, which are dairy replacements. Moving on to the next slide, the results from sex semen, that's the first thing we're asked when people are interested in the product. We would pick a figure of about 90% approximately relative conception rate. So you know your own conception rate on your farm, multiply it by 0.9, and that's where you're going to be at with sex semen. AI Technician Service from the ICBF database in 2023 showed that heifers had a conventional of 66% conception rate versus sexed at 61%, and cows were conventional at 57% versus sexed at 50%. So it is a slightly lower conception rate product, and it's something that we need to acknowledge, but it is improving year on year to add. Moving on to the next slide. So I suppose the previous speakers, in terms of picking the correct cows and heifers for sex semen, we would say pick your top 50% of your herd based on EBI. Also look at your milk recording figures if you're using sex semen on cows. Below is the criteria, I suppose, that Teagasc have developed protocols for usage of sex semen for heifers and cows. It's important that we adhere to those to improve our chances of high conception rates with sex semen. Moving on to the next slide. Handling, it is a fragile product. There is less sperm in the straw with it. The big thing, in my opinion, is that we only thaw 2 straws at the one time maximum. The other criteria, which are below that first bullet point, they're similar for conventional to sexed. Okay, so the same time procedures, the same things you do in terms of pre-warm gun, particularly if the temperature outside is quite cool, and you deposit semen in the exact same place. But the important thing is you don't thaw a lot of straws at the one time. In terms of timing of AI, the ideal is 14 to 20 hours post onset of heat. So it is a little bit later than with conventional semen. And that is something we have to get our head around, is that if you're using sex semen, you have to go in later to get higher conception rates than you do with conventional semen. It is a challenge, and with once a day AI, okay? Twice a day AI is not a challenge. The next steps, and just with the crystal ball gazing that we would see in terms of our journey as a company with sex semen, is we would see growth in dairy beef sex semen. We are already and produce semen from them. If you're in the National Genotype Programme, the sire of the calf will be taken care of by that. Moving on to the next slide.
Hey, Ger, are you seeing that take-home message?
Moving on to the next slide.
So maybe as Ger maybe speaks to us around the take-home message, maybe that I'm taking from the slides that Ger has presented. It is very much, he's very clear around that farmer confidence is growing. And Ger, do you want to speak?
Sorry.
To? Yeah, no problem at all.
Yeah,
do you want to speak to your take-home message?
Next slide. Yeah, I suppose if we look at the take-home messages, is farmer confidence is growing. It's becoming more mainstream now. Okay, it is a fragile product. We need to handle it with care. It is the best way of getting genetic gain. We've more higher index replacements by going down the sex semen route. And the other last point, I suppose, from a scalability of an industry point of view, it is an awful lot to add in terms of with more early maturing dairy beef animals that we can, more high early maturing dairy beef animals, which will reduce our methane emissions because we're slaughtering them at a younger age. And the final point in Tomas is it is in limited supply, so it's important that we would order it early.
Ger, that's great, and thank you very much. And look, while I have put up here the text number and the email address for questions, given the number of questions that have come in, I honestly don't think we'll be able to take any more. But I do need to put maybe some questions to. So Sandra, we might bring you back in if that's okay, and I might put two questions to you. I might put two questions to you that have come in here, and the first one is. Maybe what's been the driving force for the increase in EBI for the monitor farmers? So that's the first question that has come in. And then there's another question here where all the monitor farmers complete the sire advice prior to the breeding season. Why is this important? So just the significance of that sire advice. Would you be able to speak to those two if you don't mind? And thank you, Sandra.
Yeah, I suppose, Thomas, it'll be going back over points that I've made with Jack already. I suppose the drive and the increase in the EBI has been that the monitor farmers have gone and chosen a team of high EBI bulls with different traits, like the milk subindex, the fertility, the fats and the proteins, the maintenance and the health qualities, and they've selected the best criteria for their herds consistently over the last number of years. And then to follow on in your next question, how have they done that, is that they've put all that criteria that they want for their next generation of calves, heifer calves on the ground into sire advice. And they've selected those bulls and put them against the best cows already delivering the highest number of milk solids or the best fat and protein percentages. So they're honing in, selecting the best and then breeding the best on those cows. And that has, propelled the gain even quicker. So as I explained, one of the herds, had over the 5 years, had an EBI of 90 euros. Bar a small purchase of stock last year, very, very small number. They have done that in-house at home by, not using a stock bull like Kevin was explaining, and has switched to 100% AI and has made, the progress, much, much quicker. And they're seeing that as well in increased profit margins as well for their family farm.
Sandra, thank you. Look, I have another question, but I'll hold it for now to give you an opportunity. And you did mention Kevin. Kevin, there's a question here around beef AI for cows, okay? And the specific question is, what DBI figure should I use? So should our farm family member use when picking beef AI for cows? Could you speak to that for a minute, Kevin? And thank you.
Yeah, well, okay, I suppose the first bit of advice I give is that if you go onto the ICBF website, we have actually an active bull list for the beef as well, for the dairy beef index. So I'd be picking bulls from the top of that list, and certainly, if you look at the top 50 bulls, that's probably as far down as I'd be going. I'd be picking bulls from the top 50. And within that, there's plenty of variation within the breed. So, for example, if you're looking for Limousin or Rawbrack or Angus. There's bulls that'll match in that. But looking at the figure, I mean, again, the top 50 have come in somewhere above 160, 165. So somewhere above that figure, ideally. Again, if it depends, you know, how much focus you want or how quick you want to improve the beef from the dairy herd, and I'd be strongly recommending above 165. But within that, look at the beef sub-index as well. And again, above 100, 110, if at all possible, above that figure for the beef sub-index. So they're the two figures, above 165 and above 100.
And, you know, look, if I can give our own 2020 Beef Club a bit of a plug here, the Calf to Beef program, I think when selecting these will also add value in terms of value you can get back from programs like that, and colleagues including Damien Sutton are there to help and support. Ger Ryan, you're not getting away, but there's a nice question in here from someone who's obviously just considering they clearly haven't used Sec Semen before, and the open question here is, what advice would you have for me as a dairy farmer who hasn't used Sec Semen before? So maybe just that dip and toe in the water, beginning to that journey. What's the open or the open guidance?
Very good, very good question. A lot of people are asking it, Tomas. My advice would be try a little, not in a synchronization program the first year. Try it on observed heats, or if your heat detection system, try a little of it, see how you get on, and I think start on the journey. Build your own confidence in how to use it and the correct animals to use it on. But I wouldn't use it in a synchronization program for someone who hasn't used Sec Semen before. Okay, that's very clear. Maybe Kevin, back to you. Kevin Downing in ICBF, back to you for a minute here now. I see a question here. Should the herds in the top 20 bred in the top 20 breeds more dairy replacements for the herds in the bottom? So maybe if you could speak to that for a minute.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, because we are saying to herds, you know, just breed from your best. But yeah, I mean, herds that are in the bottom 20 or 40%, you know, unfortunately, no matter what they do in terms of breeding replacements, they're always going to struggle to make the gains and get up into the above average, I suppose, category. So yes, the quickest way for the herds that are really poor on EBI today to make those gains is to purchase in animals. Now, obviously, there's issues around TB, which I've mentioned as well, that, you know, health considerations. But, you know, if you're buying from a high health status herd, you know, you are minimizing the risk there. But certainly the quickest way for those herds is to buy in from the high EBI herds. And yeah, you're right. If we can get those high EBI herds to continue breeding enough replacements to service that market, it is the best way for the industry to move on. And I know we did some research on that there, kind of a what if analysis last year, and looked at it. And I think that if we were to transplant, we'll call it the replacements from the top 20% into the bottom 40% of herds. Now, we're not saying it's all the gains are going to come from genetics, but we were using a figure of maybe around 35% coming from genetics. You know, that was equivalent to, you know, about 50 million on a national scale. So there's huge gains to be made. And I'm not sure what the answer is, but if there was some initiative to put in place, and I don't know, I'm not sure what the answer is, but if there was, to achieve that, I think that would be the quickest way that we could improve the EBI and the genetics within the country.
Kevin, thank you. And look, you mentioned EBI, and that brings me on to my next question to you, Sandra. But before I do, look, if I can ask people, look, we won't be able to take any more questions. So just in terms of the time frame, so just to thank everyone who has submitted questions, and we are trying to get through them. But maybe specifically on EBI, Sandra, there is a question here. What are the key traits in EBI that the monitor farms look for? Okay, so look, maybe it's been touched on generally by Kevin and detailed, but from the monitor farm perspective, what are the key traits in EBI that the monitor farms are looking for?
Okay, I suppose the key ones that I would see is they're looking for the PTA in protein percentage of 0.2, the PTA in fat 0.3%, they're looking at the PTAs for fat and protein kgs above what they already have. So if they were, let's say, 12 and 10 kgs, they're looking, they won't choose anything below that, they'll go above it. So they're aiming above, and they'll try and pass out the best of what they have in the herd. So they'll look at the progeny that was born last year, and they'll see if they can best those. They would also be looking for positive in health and you know, a maintenance figure, that will depend on herd type, but always positive for that as well, because you've got, as explained by Kevin, the traits like lameness, mastitis, and in TB. So we're looking for positive in those as well. So that would be a quick summary. And I suppose fertility as well, most of them would choose, you know, they've, as you've seen, they've a high 6-week calf rate, so the fertility would definitely be above 120, and going forward, they would be some of the parameters.
Okay, look, thanks, Sandra. I think, Ger, if I can go back to you for a minute here, you used the word synchronization during your response to my last question, and it clearly has prompted another question, because there's a question here: are dairy farmers using sex semen in their synchronization program? Just in terms of what you're seeing yourself, Ger.
The simple answer is yes.
Okay.
We're seeing yes, but I suppose my advice would be, if you're using sex semen for the first time, don't use it in synchronization program. It is a more fragile product, and if it does go wrong, it'll put your calving pattern, your 6-week calving rate wrong. So I think it depends where you are on the journey. If you're starting the journey, no, I wouldn't use a synchronization and sext. If I'm on the journey of using sex semen and I'm happy with synchronization programs I've used previously, I would consider it. The other thing, Thomas, is it is a high cost system when you go into a synchronization program and sex semen. Just be conscious of that.
Okay. Kevin, I'm going to leave the last question, well, one of the last questions with you, and it's around herd management and herd performance. And the question being asked is, what percentage, it's a very specific question, what percentage of the improvement in herd performance is due to genetics, and what percentage is due to management? So the role of genetics and management in terms of delivering on that herd performance. Could you give any guidance on that?
Yeah, look, it's a difficult one to put a precise figure on, but we would estimate that, just looking at data from the co-op, and certainly looking at last year, what we focused in, we tried to pick herds of similar size and to see the difference in EBI with herds of the similar size. So you would have assumed similar management, and we were kind of coming up with a figure of around 30% of the gains were coming from the genetics, and probably 70% coming from management. So, you know, if you were to even to look at last year, you know, our 2023, for example, was a real bad year weather-wise. And, you know, you'll see the milk solids, and you saw in Jack's herd there as well, the milk solids went way down. So there's an indication that, and it's not just management, it's the environment as well, that has an impact on the actual performance of the herd. But definitely it's I'd say it's definitely more than 25%, and I'd say probably up to about 35. So between 25 and 35, I'm hedging my bets.
Okay, interesting. Jack, we're going to give the last word to you. I mean, it's nice for us all here to present and to have all this data and information. In terms of what you've taken from the presentations, is there one nugget or standout that you're saying, look, one, it reaffirms what you're doing is right, or two, it's some change you might take on the farm? Look, tomorrow when you put on the boots, or maybe even you're going to finish off calving, I think you said you had 7 or 8 calved already today. What are you taking out of today that maybe this evening's webinar that you're saying, look, that's something I'm going to take on, or I'm going to continue to do on your farm there with Jack, or with Larry, Nanette, and Rathcormac?
Yeah, I suppose for the last few years, we really have put a focus on that fat and protein percentage.
Yeah.
And you can really see it in our young stock now in the EBI report, that like the young stock coming through have a way more potential to produce what I consider more, look, there's no point in saying otherwise, it is more valuable milk. And like at the end of the day, look, it's a job, we're all trying to make money. That is where I'm focused on. Look, I don't think I can improve my 6-week calving rate a whole pile more. I hope to continue it at that, but I don't think I'll be able to improve it a whole pile more. So I need to focus on these sorts of things now to maybe increase my, say, my kgs, milk solids and stuff. So like, look, I'm like, we're probably going to keep choosing bulls the way we choose the bulls. But I'm looking forward to seeing in the next couple of generations, say the next couple of years, just to see how that, say, what we're doing with our breeding now will come into effect, like, you know. So yeah, so look, as from what I'm taking tonight, I think I'm going to continue at what we're trying to achieve, try and keep picking the best bulls we possibly can to hit the criteria we want, and just use their advice to basically to pick up the cows to basically to put them on. We will be using sex semen going forward. We want to try and, I suppose, try and fast track the improving the herd as best we can, and I feel sex semen will do that. And look, you have a more valuable calf after as well in that beef calf. So that's what we're kind of going to try and do going forward. And yeah.
Listen, Jack, isn't that a really, yeah, brilliant. That's a really good way to finish up. I mean, I'm not going to try and summarize because you've just done it. I think the takeaway I'm taking is breeding for that milk solids piece, because the link to profitability is really important. Just suffice to say, thank you, Jack, for pulling yourself away. I think, what are you up to, 75% through now? Thereabouts with the calving, good man. And you stepped away from a really busy time to help us to bring to life the detail and to put colour on it. And look, I just want to thank you and Sandra and Kevin and Ger and indeed those who joined in strong numbers on the webinar, and ask you maybe, look, stay tuned to TirlanFarmLife.com and our X account at TirlanFarmLife, where this webinar will be up and available on both our YouTube channel and Tirlan Farm Life. I do want to thank you for watching, and to our speakers for joining us, and indeed, look, our supporting colleagues Caroline and Twanda, who made all this happen seamlessly in the background. And so from us here in Tirlan, and from our speakers from Teagasc, from Debate Genetics, and from ICBF, and from Jack Carney and Rat Cormac, thank you very much for taking the time to join us this evening, and safe farming.